Blessings on blessings, yeah, yeah. Blessings on blessings, yeah.
Shalom, family. Shalom, Mishpachah. We are here for another 6-day study, and we are in Genesis chapter 13, and we're going to get right into it. Let's start reading verses 1 through 3. It says, And Abram went up out of Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot with him into the south. And Abram was very rich in cattle, in silver, and in gold. And he went on his journeys from the south even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Hai. All right. So, one thing I want us to notice here in verse 1, it says, And Abram went up out of Egypt. So in Hebrew, the word went up is the Hebrew word Allah, Allah. And it means to go up, as in to ascend, as if you're going up a mountain. That's what this means. You're going up from a lower elevation to a higher elevation. So when it says Abram went up out of Egypt, it does not mean necessarily that Abram went north. What it means is that Abram went up in elevation. He ascended up out of Egypt. So the place where he went, it had to be higher than where he was presently located in Egypt. He and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him, into the south. So Abram went up, he ascended up out of Egypt, and he ended up going into the south. Now, this word south is the Hebrew word negeb, negeb. And what it means is the South country. It means South. It can be South, generally speaking, as well as South specifically in the region of Judah. So southern Judah is known as the Negeb. In the land of Israel, if you look on the map towards the south, there is a desert area, and that area is called the Negeb, and it is known as the south region of Judah. So this is important. This is very important because there are many that believe that Abram, when he went up out of Egypt, into the south, they believe that Abraham actually went south of Egypt, but that is not actually what the text is saying. What the text is saying is that Abram or Abraham, he ascended. He went up higher in elevation out of Egypt into the south region of Judah, which actually would have been north of where Abram was currently located. So I want to point that out because that's important in terms of knowing where Abraham went. There's some that believe that Abraham went deeper down into Africa, but actually that's not the case. The Negeb is a region within Israel, the southern portion of Israel. It's a place in the south of Israel. Let's look at a few examples so we can see how this word is being used. So we're going to look at Genesis 28:14, and this is an example of Negeb being used generally of the south. So it says in verse 14, And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. So Abiyah is letting Abraham know that your descendants, they're going to go to the north, south, the east, and the west. And so south here is generally being used. In Exodus 26, verse 18, it says, And thou shalt make thy borders Make the boards for the tabernacle 20 boards on the south side southward. So here this word south is also negeb, and we see it's being used here generally speaking of the south. Now, okay, so now we're going to look at a few examples of negeb in reference to the land of Canaan. And this is the way that Genesis chapter 18, verse 1 should be interpreted when it says that Abram went into the south. He went into the land of Canaan, the south of the land of Canaan, not south relative to Egypt. So Numbers 21, verse 1, it says, and when King Arad, the Canaanite, which dwelt in the Negeb in the south, heard tell that Israel came by the way of the spies, then he fought against Israel and took some of them prisoners. So this Negeb or south is the south of the land of Canaan. Okay, Joshua chapter 15, verse 2. It says, and their south, their Negeb border, was from the shore of the salt sea, from the bay that looketh southward. So here we see this word Negeb or south being used twice. And it's specifically talking about the south of the land of Canaan, or what we call the land of Israel. The border, the south border, was from the shore of the Salt Sea and the bay that looketh southward, or to the Negeb. Joshua 15, verse 20 through 21, it says, this is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Judah, according to their families, and the uttermost cities of the tribe of the children of Judah toward the coast of Edom southward were Kabzeel and Eder and Jagur. So the inheritance of the children of Judah, of the tribe of Judah, they dwelt in the Negeb in the south, which would be the southward region of the land of Canaan. Okay. So, like I said, this is important because we want to be certain of where Abraham went. So, on the screen to the left, right here, if you, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the light blue area is Egypt, and that area is known as the Nile Delta. And if we look at this legend right here, the bluish green, the light bluish green is 34 meters. And this area is even lighter, a lighter greenish bluer color than this 34 meters. This area is actually 1 to 5 meters above sea level. So not too much above sea level. One of the reasons why Egypt is so prosperous when it comes to agriculture, when there's famines in the land, that Abraham and others are going down toward Egypt, is because they have this area that is so fertile, which is called the Nile Delta, which is where Goshen was located, the best part of the land. And one of the reasons is because we have this Nile River. And so this is very low. It's a valley, called a valley for a reason. And as you go east, northeast, then we start getting into this green area right here. This green area is 163 meters. Then, as we continue to go up higher and higher in elevation, we're in the Negeb now. We're in the south area. You can see it starts to turn yellow. Yellow is 458 meters. This area is 1 to 5 meters. Now we're at 458 meters. And Bethel is actually up in this region right here. And this orangish brownish, these orangish brownish areas are around 624, 800 meters. So that's pretty high up. That's actually, we're going to see on another slide, around 2,300 square feet or 2,800 if I'm remembering correctly. So that's a big difference. And so we can see from this that Abram and his family, they are truly ascending. They are going, as the scripture says, they went up. And this is just another map where it just generally gives you the direction that they travel. And so they went from Egypt, this Nile Delta area, which has great agriculture, and then they went higher and higher in elevation. In this area here, you see Negeb right here, which is south of Canaan. And you can also notice it changes the the topography here changes. These are mountains right here because these are the mountains of Judea. So he's going up in elevation. I know I spent a lot of time on this, but this is important because there's a lot of people that have varying opinions on this. So want to make sure that we do our due diligence to make sure that we are understanding what it means when it says he went south. Just lastly about this, before we get to questions, when I type in Google, what's the elevation of the Nile Delta, which is that area we were looking at in Egypt, it says the elevation gradually descends from 18 meters above sea level near, which is 60 feet above sea level near Cairo, to around 1 meter, which is 3.3 feet or less at the Mediterranean coast. So basically 3.3 feet above sea level to about 60 feet at the most is the elevation where Abraham was at in Egypt. Next, the elevation of Bethel. It says the modern day site of Bethel, which is the small Muslim village of Baitan, is at an elevation of approximately 880 meters or 2,887 feet above sea level. So just to show you, they were going up as they were traveling. They went to the south, but they went to the south of the land of Canaan. Okay, before I go, any questions or comments or insights? Yes, sir. Aki Gadol.
Shalom, shalom. You're correct on that, Aki. You laid it out very well. You used not only the Google and maps and things like that, but the elevation is the key to it. The verse in Genesis 13 and 1, it goes from, it talks about going up, and then it speaks about from the south in verse 3. So now we're talking the difference between elevation and direction. So you're absolutely right on what you said. A lot of the people that, as you said, that talk about this verse, they assume that the map is upside down. But if you have the map upside down and south, I guess Africa is actually north, what direction would you be going if you're leaving Egypt? You would be going south into Israel, just as Genesis 13 and 1 and Genesis 13 and 3 says that he went into the south, and he went from the south to Bethel, which is even further south. You can either choose to that it up means north, or you can choose that the maps are upside down. So either way, it doesn't fit the narrative that's out there. Just want to point that out.
Toda Aki. Excellent point. Akifa, I saw your hand.
Shalom, shalom, Aki.
Shalom.
Toda Yah for you laying this out. It's funny because this was in one of my lessons a few years back, and I touched on the exact same points that you touched on, but you presented it way more eloquently than I did. So Toda Yah for that. I just want to add that everything you said is correct. It just so happens that him going up out of Egypt into the south or into the Negev, that is why that area is so named what it's named today. You'll notice that the true name is Negev with a B, not Negev with a V, like they try to tell us these days. But the last thing I wanted to point out, and this is just a side note, it does not have any bearing on this story, but the southernmost portion of the Negev, which is Eliot, is actually south of Cairo, which would have been Memphis in Abraham's time, which would have also been the capital. So either way you slice it, but the way to Shur, the way that you have it, is the way that Abraham most likely would have traveled. That was the way that they always traveled. That was the way that Israel was supposed to come up out of Egypt, but Yah chose to take them in a different direction. But yeah, everything you laid out is perfect, and Todah Yah for that.
Told y'all for that. Told y'all for that extra insight. I see a coat, Tina.
Shalom. I
Shalom.
was just wondering, okay, so they traveled south up through Negab up into Canaan, but where? Can you move the map over so we could get an idea, or I could get an idea of where Israel is? I know you mentioned it, but I don't see it.
Oh, okay. So the land of Canaan is the land of Israel.
That's what I thought. Okay, I just wanted to make sure my thinking was right. Okay, thank you.
Yes, it's called the land of Canaan because that's where the Canaanites lived. And so you'll actually see this in multiple examples in the scripture where the name of the inhabitants of their family name is the actual land of the name. And it's called the land of Canaan because, yep, that's where the Canaanites were. So you still see that name, even though the Israelites took over that land, but the people before them, they're Canaanites.
Okay, so now my other one is, this is the older map or the newer? And if it's the older, was Africa separated from all of this, or is all of this Africa?
I'm gonna let Kiefer answer that question. Kiefer answer. Yeah, Kiefer.
So I had a feeling that you were going to say that, but Shalom, Akotina. The first thing I heard you mention something, and I just want to clarify. Abraham and Sarai did not leave Egypt and travel southward. That's not what they did. All right. So they went up out of Egypt and they traveled into, let's say, a place called the South.
The South. Okay.
All right. And that word in Hebrew is Negeb. So they
Negev.
traveled up, they left Egypt and they went into the Negeb. And if you look on this map that Akioel has on the screen, you can see where the arrow's pointing down on your far left. If you
Negev.
look at that, yep, that bottom line is going back. So that's the way that they traveled up out of Egypt, the way of Shur to Beer Lahairoi, and then the next place is Negeb in Beersheba. All right.
Yes.
So that's the way. Now, to answer your question about Africa, yes, this is all Africa. This was always considered a portion or a part of northeastern Africa. It was only separated from Africa by the Suez Canal when that was built. But prior to that, during Abraham's time, you could travel from Canaan or Israel into Egypt with no problem. Now that the canal is there, it gives you the sense that Israel is separated from Africa, but it was always a part of northeastern Africa. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
All right. So next we're gonna read verses 5 through 9. And it says, and Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. And the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. And there was a strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land. And Abram said unto Lot, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we be brethren. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. Any questions or comments before I add anything? Anybody got any questions or comments on verses 5 through 9? Okay, if you got a question, just raise your hand or a comment. And I want to point out in verse 6, it says, we see that the land was not able to bear them, or it was not able to support them. So Abram and Lot, they both had people and they had possessions. They had so much that they couldn't dwell together. It reminds me of when you have a house, but everybody wants to live with you, all your cousins, some of your friends. That you got everybody in this house that wants to live with you. At some point, strife and contention may arise because there's not enough food to go around, or maybe there's not enough space for everyone in a certain spot. And so that's what's happening here essentially. Abram and Lot, they have so much, the land is not able to support them. I could even just thinking about like being at the well trying to get water. There's only going to be so many wells because you got to work to dig a well, and it's tough work. And I'm sure it's even a lot more tougher back in Abraham's time because they did not necessarily have all this machinery that we have today to make it easier to dig wells. So I can imagine just being at the line waiting for the well. Having to sit because it used to just be my family, but now we got to wait for 2 or 3 families. And these types of things, when you have too many people and too many possessions, I won't say too many, but so many possessions and so many cattle and animals, it's gonna be too much for the 2 families of Lot and Abraham. So someone has to leave so that those that remain will have more room to live. So we know that Abraham, we know he had a lot because he was very rich in cattle and in silver and gold, as it says in verse 2. But I'm gonna let Aki Gadol go. I see you got your hand up. Go ahead, Aki Gadol.
I think Kanan had his hand up before.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Yehoganan.
Yeah, just be quick, man. I just want to know that they mentioned the Canaanite and the Perizzite right behind the strife between the herdsmen of Lot and Abraham. And I'm just wondering, is that because they were going to be a problem for both of them later on down the line?
I absolutely believe that that's why it mentions it. That's my opinion though. That's my opinion. But we do see in the scriptures that the Canaanite and the Perizzite are a problem all throughout Israel's history, and it's no different here with Abraham. I also believe that the Canaanite and the Perizzite may be mentioned because it's just showing there's more people in the land as well besides Abraham and Lot. It's not just Abram and Lot. You also have other nations, other groups here in the land as well. That's my opinion on that. Did I answer both your questions or did I miss one?
No, yes, you did. That was perfect.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Netanyahu.
Shalom. Yeah, Yehokanan, he stole my thunder there with that, but you're absolutely right, Akioel, with the answer. It's more people in the land. If you look in Genesis chapter 12, verse 6, when Abram was first offered to go into Canaan, he came to Canaan and he went to Shechem, then he went through the plain of Moreh. And it says that in Genesis 12:6 that the Canaanite was then in the land. Now, here, after he comes from Egypt, Mitzrayim, after the fast, you find out that the Canaanite is still in the land in Genesis 13, verse 7, that you have on the screen. The Canaanite still in the land, but also the Perizzite is there too, where the Perizzite was not mentioned previously in Genesis chapter 12, verse 6. Now they're mentioning Perizzites also being in the land. So there's more people there. And instead of Abram and Lot's herdmen having strife with the Canaanite and the Perizzite, they start having strife with one another. And I'll be putting out a video soon that deals on Genesis 13, but I'll talk about that in that video. But that's the reason Genesis 12:6 says the Canaanite was then in the land when Abram first arrived. And then Genesis 13:7 says the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land after Abram returned from Egypt due to the famine. Toda.
So we see there's this strife, and one thing that we see in verse 8, Abram said unto Lot, let there be no strife. He said, I pray thee between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we be brethren. He said, we are Akim. That's what he said in the Hebrew. We Akim. We don't need to have strife. And so I believe it's very wise of Abraham what he did in verse 9. He said, is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself. Abram rather be separated from his Akim, from his family, than to allow strife to be between them. So what Abram says is, he says, I pray thee, if you will take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if you depart to the right, then I'll go to the left. Abraham was not flexing. He was not pulling rank over Lot and saying, hey, I'm Abraham. The covenant was made with me. He's not doing any of that. He's actually taking a lower position. He's actually humbling himself for the reason of not wanting strife to be between him and Lot. So we can learn a lot from Abraham. And I thought we could look at a few scriptures in regards to strife. How do we deal with it? Proverbs 15:18. It says, a wrathful man stirreth up strife, but he that is slow to anger appeaseth strife. So Abraham, he wasn't a man full of wrath. He was slow to anger. We know he was slow to anger because he appeaseth strife. That word in the Hebrew for appeaseth, it means to quiet or to lie down. He did not allow the strife to build up. Strife is just contention. He didn't want to have any contention or issues or problems with Lot. So Proverbs 17:1, it says, better is a dry morsel and quietness therewith than a house full of sacrifices with strife. Now, we know from what we read in Genesis chapter 12 that Abraham, he built an altar. Abraham built an altar in Bethel. And we build altars, and on those altars, we sacrifice. And so Abiyah required the children of Israel to build an altar for the purpose of sacrificing, for the purpose of worshiping him. But Proverbs says that it's better to just have a dry morsel. I just want this dry morsel. I'd rather have this dry piece of bread than to have a house full of sacrifices with strife. So that shows you that it's wise to remove strife. It's better to have a little bit with no strife than to have much with strife, which is actually the condition that Abram was in. He had much wealth. We saw in verse 2 of Genesis 13, he was abundant in silver and gold and cattle, but having that strife, it makes it not, it's stressful. Nobody wants to have all the money in the world, but not be able to enjoy it because they're dealing with strife at home. It says in verse 14, the beginning of strife is as when one letteth out water, therefore leave off contention before it be meddled with. Verse 19 says, he loveth transgression that loveth strife. If you love to argue, I know some people that they love to get in an argument. They like to start stuff. But the Most High is letting us know that if we love strife, that also means we love transgression. And as we're about to see, the transgressors, their end is destruction. Their end is destruction. Proverbs 23, it is an honor for a man to cease from strife. It's an honorable thing to do. That's what Abraham did. Man, we can learn so much from Abraham. But every fool will be meddling. Every fool will be meddling. Let's look at a couple more scriptures dealing with this strife. Proverbs 26:17-21. It says, he that passeth by and meddleth with strife belonging not to him is like one that taketh a dog by the ears. I'm going to tell you what this means in today's vernacular. Those who don't like to mind their own business, causing strife, is like somebody yanking a dog by the ear. Those that can't mind their own business, they meddling with strife. So what happens if you yank a dog by the ears? You can cause harm to the dog that causes much pain to the dog, but you also might get bitten yourself. Getting involved in things that don't concern you, causing contention. Verse 18, it says, as a madman who casteth firebrands, arrows, and death. So this person is as a person that goes mad, who causes firebrands, meaning like shooting. Think of in today's world, we're shooting guns and arrows, causing death. You don't want anyone that is mad or insane to be holding a weapon. That's what it's like for those that cause strife. Verse 19, it says, so is the man that deceiveth his neighbor and saith, am not I in sport? Where no wood is, there the fire goeth out. So where there is no talebearer, the strife ceaseth. That verse 20 is saying, when there is no one to gossip and tell others secrets, that's when the strife goes away. That's when the contention between brethren, it leaves. Verse 21, as coals are to burning coals and wood to fire, so is a contentious man to kindle strife. So I appreciate Abraham because we can learn from him. Strife, it does no good. It causes destruction. It causes pain. It causes death. And so it was good that Abram was wise and decided to separate from his brethren Lot instead of becoming prideful. Those that choose to be contentious, argumentative with others, want to always be right, those are ones that have a pride issue. We see Abraham didn't have that issue. I'll read one more verse. Proverbs 28:25. It says, he that is of a proud heart stirreth up strife, but he that putteth his trust in Yah shall be made fat. And isn't that what happened with Abraham? He was not proud. He put his pride down. He lowered himself, humbled himself, and The end result, he was made fat. We see that because Abraham was given all this land. So now we're going to look at verses 10 through 13. Verse 10, it says, And Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before Yah destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of Yahuwah, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zor. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves the one from the other. Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before Yahuwah exceedingly. Okay, any comments or questions on verses 10 through 13? Verses 10 through 13.
Shalom, Maki.
Shalom.
Something that jumped out at me here is Yah called Abraham and told him where to go, but Lot, when they all got there and everything, at this point now, Lot is choosing. And to me, it doesn't seem like he's asking Yah where he wants Yah for him to go. I don't know. He just was just making up his own mind, doing his own thing, and he ended up choosing an area that wasn't so good.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And verse 11 is clear. Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan. So he, unlike Abraham, Abraham would listen to Yah's voice and he would seek Yah's voice. And whatever Yah told him to do, that's what he did. In verse 12, we see that he pitched his tent towards Sodom. And in verse 13, it says the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners. So he definitely pitched his tent or chose the wrong place.
I think it was Daniel that was saying that Lot chose, and this is true. I think it's verse 10 where it says Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of the Yarden. And we know that 1 John 2, 1 John 2:16 talks about the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, right? But we also find something in 2 Timothy 2 where it tells us to flee also youthful lust, but follow righteousness, faith, charity, peace with them that call on the master out of a pure heart, right? And we know that Abraham had a relationship with the Most High, and I'm sure Lot knew he had a relationship with the Most High. But Second Timothy is telling us that we should follow those who are righteous, faithful, charity, peace with them that call on the master, but foolish and unlearned questions avoid, knowing that they do gender strifes. So I say all of this to say that we get the sense from everything that we're told in Genesis 12 all the way up to where we're at in Genesis 13 that Lot is younger than Abraham, and he may be making this decision based on his maturity level physically, but also his maturity level spiritually. Now we know that the scripture ends up calling Lot righteous, but at this point, we can still see that Lot is spiritually immature. So just wanted to add that point.
Totally. Excellent point. As I was studying this passage as well, I was thinking the same thing that Lot definitely was not mature. In fact, when Lot, when Abraham's herdsmen and Lot's herdsmen were having strife with one another, one of the things that I would have done, knowing what I know now, is Me being Lot, I would have tried to nip that in the bud. Hey, let's get along because we're following Abraham. And in that moment, he could have done something like that to so that Abraham wouldn't have had to say, we need to separate. They've could have done something else to try to deal with their issues, but Lot not being wise, being immature, he decides to separate himself to the point where he's separating himself to be and live amongst a people that are immoral. But yeah, excellent point. Another thing I want to look at too, I'm not going to go through too much here for the sake of time, but I noticed it said that Sodom and Gomorrah, before Yah destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, as the garden of Yahuwah. So this land that he chose was a very lush land. Archaeologists now believe that Tal el Hammam is what it's called now. There's it's a place where this excavation has been done. They believe that this is the site where Sodom was at. And I'll just read a little bit of this at the top here. It says Tel El Haman is one of the largest and most significant Bronze Age sites in the entire southern Levant. It is situated at the far eastern side of an alluvial plain located at the southern end of the Jordan Valley. Though much of the site still remains buried, we now have a good impression of the general layout and key features thanks to the 16 seasons of excavations and probes carried out across the site by Dr. Stephen Collins and his TEHEP team. Using the drawings of Tel El Hammam, site architect Dr. Lean Rittemeyer and artist Balaj Balog, artist Julia Goddard created the following illustration of the Middle Bronze Age site. So, my point in showing this was just to give you an idea of what it may have looked like. They have done some excavations in that area and they can see what you're seeing on the screen. But the reason it was so lush is because of the Jordan River in the middle where it says well watered everywhere. That's what we just read in the scripture. It says, besides the nearby Jordan River, in ancient times, a gushing water source whose banks overflowed seasonally, Tel El Hamim was surrounded by perennial springs with water disgorging from the Transjordan Aquifer and coursing down from the adjacent eastern mountains and wadis. So just to show from what is in this area, there's springs here as well as the Jordan River that still goes through this area. But obviously, it is not as lush now as it was. I'm not going to go through all of this because we're going to have another Genesis teaching that goes further in depth to Sodom and Gomorrah. But I just wanted to show you the contrast between what it could have possibly looked like. We know it was like it said water, it was like the Garden of Eden, and now it's like this. It's dry, it's barren. And if you look in these pictures, these are actual pits. These are pits that hold bones. These are graves. And the reason that there are holes is because the locals in these areas over the past decades and maybe even centuries, I'm not sure, but I know over the last decades have been digging. And when they dig, they find bones. And they're finding things from ancient antiquities. And if they find things, they keep them. So that's why there's all these holes everywhere, just to show you it used to be so lush, but now it's basically a humongous graveyard, cemetery. This is Gomorrah picture of what the archaeologists believe that this is the area where Gomorrah was at. This area is also very dry, very barren, nothing to be seen. here. But like I said, I'm not going to go into this too much because I believe Akifa is going to handle that for us. Go ahead, Ima, Olivia.
Yeah, talking about Sodom and Gomorrah, I did see a video of in the past where talking about that land being dry, and have witnessed myself that is what it looks like. I saw a archaeologist or whatever their title would be actually go to Sodom and Gomorrah and pulled from the rock there and lit it with a match, and it ignited because of what Yah had done there. And there's still physical evidence there. That rock, that's those ashes and those things that's there, is you can actually light it with a match and it will still ignite.
Yes. I actually was just looking at that video right before this message, and I decided not to play it because I don't know what Kifa is going to do. I don't want to. He's going to be in the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, but I know exactly what you're referring to. That you can go to Sodom and Gomorrah right now, and you will find sulfur balls, not necessarily in Sodom, but by the Dead Sea area, because there were multiple cities. In fact, the cities that were destroyed, that area was called the cities of the plains. So in the Dead Sea, when the sulfur was coming down on Sodom and Gomorrah and the other cities in the cities of the plain, the sulfur that went into the water was preserved. So those sulfur balls are still there because a lot of the water has receded in the Dead Sea. And so you'll find I've also been in this area. I went to Israel and I went to the Dead Sea area, and I drove through Sodom and Gomorrah. I didn't get out and go to the actual site, but you can go there and you can definitely, you'll see a bunch of sulfur balls. You can pick them up. You can still light them with fire. It's actually one of the biggest reasons that I believe Israel, the modern state of Israel, is actually where Israel was, is because of all those sulfur balls that are in that area. And yeah, so thanks for bringing that out, Ima. Okay, I'll just read a few of these scriptures so we can see the wicked and the sinners. In verse 13, it says, "But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before Yah exceedingly." So I'm just going to read a few of these. Psalm 1:5. It says, "Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous." This not only applies in this lifetime, the wicked and the unrighteous, it also implies after the resurrection. The ungodly and the sinners, they're not going to be standing with the righteous. They are not going to be able to stand in the judgment. Psalm 37:38, it says, "But the transgressors shall be destroyed together. The end of the wicked shall be cut off." Let me look at Isaiah 128, the last verse. It says, "In the destruction of the transgressors and of the sinners shall be together, and they that forsake Yah shall be consumed." So this Sodom and Gomorrah, it hadn't been destroyed at this point. It was lush, it was green, there's water, everything. Lot said, "I want that land over there. I want that piece of land right there." But Sodom and Gomorrah is a witness or a testimony to how Abba Yah, how serious he is about the wicked and the transgressors and the sinners and what their end is going to be. So we got a living testimony that you can visit right now. Now, I'm not trying to go to Israel right now at this moment, but if you go there, you can see for yourself. All right, let's keep going. Amos 9:8. It says, "Behold, the eyes of the master Yahuwah are upon the sinful kingdom." and I will destroy it from off the face of the earth, saving that I will not utterly destroy the house of Jacob, saith Yah. For lo, I will command and I will sift the house of Israel among all nations. As corn is sifted in a sieve, yet shall not the least grain fall upon the earth. My point bringing this out, this is not just the Gentiles that have to worry about about the judgment of Yah. It's also the house of Israel. Verse 10, it says, all the sinners of my people shall die by the sword, which say, the evil shall not overtake nor prevent us. And that day will I raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen and close up the breaches thereof, and I will raise up his ruins, and I will build it as in the days of old. So at this moment in time, Sodom and Gomorrah in ruins. Much of Israel is in ruins, but Yahuwah is going to restore. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to go jump to verse 14. It says, and I will bring again the captivity of my people of Israel, and they shall build the waste cities and inhabit them, and they shall plant vineyards and drink the wine thereof. They shall also make gardens and eat the fruit of them, and I will plant them upon their land, and they shall no more be pulled up out of their land, which I have given them, saith Yahuwah thy Elohim. The land will be restored, but you're going to have to be on that side that doesn't cause strife. You're going to have to be on that side that is righteous, not the wicked and the ungodly. Verse 14, it says, and Yahuwah said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated unto him, lift up now thy eyes and look from the place where thou art northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. Arise, walk through the land in length of it and in the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee. Then Abram removed his tent and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto, praise to the Most High. In verse 14, it says, and Yahuwah said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, lift up now thy eyes and look from the place where thou art northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land which to you will I give it, and to your seed forever. So here, Yah waits till after Lot was separated from him. And as Kifa pointed out, we see that Lot lifted up his eyes and he chose. Here in verse 14, Abram is told by Yah to lift up his eyes. And after Yah tells him to lift up his eyes, he said, look, he says, from the place where you're at, northward, southward, eastward, and westward, everything, I'm giving it to you. There's a difference. That's right, Ima. There's a contrast here. Lot lifted up his eyes. Akifa talked about the pride of life, the lust of the eyes. Abram is not concerned about what he wants. He wants to please the Most High Yah. And because he humbles himself so greatly, Abba Yah greatly rewards him. So if you humble yourself under the mighty hand of Yah, he will exalt you in due time. Abraham was a humble, righteous man of Yah. And I think I'm going to end right there. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. All right. If there's no hands, we will end in prayer. We will end in prayer.
blessings on blessings, yeah, yeah. Blessings on blessings, yeah.